All right, thank you, Sarah. You know, one of Sarah's last slides, she showed factors to consider in terms of shellfish restoration. Of course, harmful algal blooms figured significantly in that. Our next speaker is Andrew Reich. Andrew's with the Bureau of Epidemiology of the Florida Department of Health. And Andrew and his colleagues have been working on assessing the, neurological shellfish poisonings during Karenia brevis blooms and their association with shellfish management areas. Andrew?
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
I'm Andy Wright, and I'm with the Florida Department of Health. I've been working at Florida Department of Health for 28.5 years, so I just keep my mouth shut for another couple of years. I think I'll get my 30, and then we'll see how it goes from there. I came here to talk a little bit about some of the work that we do with a number of different partners. And I guess I would like to know how many other people in this room are from Florida Department of Health. Anyone else? That's what I thought. Generally, talk to a lot of audiences in health. What about folks from the Department of Agriculture? Let's see, one hand. Okay. That's not bad. And what about Fish and Wildlife? It's probably a bunch of you guys there. Florida District and the rest of it. Okay. It's interesting. We're kind of like a little quirky group that deals with things related to harmful algal blooms. One of those harmful algal blooms, of course, is Florida red tide. We've been working on issues with Florida red tide for years, but we really ramped it up in the last 10 years with some external funding from National Institute of Health and then from National Science Foundation and some other folks. So we're trying to build in-house capability to respond to these things. And it's important partnerships that we have with a number of the groups that I've already mentioned. As I kind of alluded to, there's a lot of people working on environmental issues in the state of Florida. There's Florida DEP, there's Fish and Wildlife, Department of Agriculture, Water Management Districts, Florida Geological Survey, all kinds of those. And we in public health have to really focus on what we do, and that's really to protect, promote, and improve the health of all people. So if you look at this beautiful beach, which is Siesta Key, one of our study sites for assessing health impacts on Florida red tide, there's all kinds of people on those beaches. There are women who are childbearing ages, some of those women are pregnant. There's older people who may have underlying illnesses. There's very small children who may not be as robust in terms of environmental exposures as adults are. So that's what we're looking for. We're not necessarily just doing the average person, but we're there to protect everybody, including those at increased risk. We have to be very careful that we don't get pulled into issues that are not really public health issues. They may be really important environmental issues, but in the Department of Health we have to make sure that we focus very heavily and very directly on public health things. As part of the work I do with harmful algal blooms, I also work on issues related to cyanobacteria, and probably a lot of people who know that cyanobacteria and nutrients have a pretty strong linkage. And so with these TMDL things that are floating around and a number of lawsuits that are in place, we tend to try to get pulled into those things by all kinds of different people. Because one of the wonderful things working in public health and environmental issues is that when you talk to people about environmental impacts, if you can pull a health issue into it, it becomes much more important. And but that being said, we have to be sure that we're really commenting on things that we know about and not just that we're interested in. Because the work that you guys are doing is really, really interesting as a biology student in college way back when. The ecology stuff is just really, really interesting. So I do want to thank everyone for doing the work they do. In Florida, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services is the agency that regulates shellfish harvesting. And that's why I wanted to really acknowledge the Department of Agriculture in this. We really work hand in hand with them to make sure that the shellfish that are eaten are safe. 1,200 bacteriological sampling stations. There's 38 shellfish harvesting areas, and that comes to 1.4 million acres. So it's a lot of work to make sure those areas are properly managed and monitored. And you can see that it's all along the Gulf Coast in the area. We have some here. And one of the challenges is that as we know more and more about HABs, algal blooms, there's emerging threats as well. So that Suinitia, for the first time, was found in St. Joe Bay at levels that would have closed the shellfish areas if it happened during the open season. Luckily, it didn't happen then. So we work with agriculture and also some of the other groups that monitor nearshore environments to make sure we understand what's going on. So the shellfish harvesting areas that I want to talk about are the ones kind of in this area. And I'm going to be talking about Karenia brevis. I'm glad I saw a couple of posters related to K. brevis, and also the last speaker also mentioned it as it relates to the scallops. The shellfish harvesting areas are managed, and if there's a red tide in the area, they're closed at cell count, so greater than equal to 5,000 cells per liter. So they close them. They're very sensitive. So if it's, and that's not very many cells. I mean, to have a really good red tide bloom, it would have to be, let's say, over 1 million cells per liter. So this is a lot lower than that. So the sensitivity is really high. And then once the red tide's in the area, and they have to, and they want to reopen it, the cell counts have to drop below that 5,000. But also it has to have a negative mouse bioassay. And this is a test where they actually use mice and inject the mice with a smush of shellfish and see how that mouse responds. And then the mouse bioassay unit, which I've been working on for years and still don't quite understand, it has to pass that test. And that's a lot, because in the past you just test mice, but now there's a whole system in place to make sure that those mice are treated properly and that the work done is needed. And so there's a lot more work that needs to be done, so that's not a trivial matter. But you can see that in this area that you're going to be looking at. Right? As most of you know, since most of you probably in this area, there's a lot of red tides in Florida. We would like last year to have been huge. But in 2005 to 2006, there was a large red tide. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this, but this is a harmful algal bloom bulletin that's put out by NOAA. If anyone would like to get this on a weekly basis, you're more than welcome to contact me, and I'll make sure that you get those. If it is red tide bloom, they increase the production of these things to once every twice a week, so that's great. And those dots, red dots, show you where there's high cell counts related to Florida red tide. There's closures of shellfish beds from January 2005 to January 2006. So that's a whole year where there's closures of those. So that really impacts the industry. And then again, from June to December, again, you guys know red tide is a recurring thing. The organism is uniquely adapted to the Gulf of Mexico and does rather well. We were interested in finding out how well these shellfish closures protected public health. So were people eating the shellfish and not getting sick, or were they getting sick? So we were using the Florida Department of Agriculture shellfish harvesting area, opening closures. We extracted data using birds. The data that we got from DAX was actually PDFs of every issuance of an advisory or a closure. It wasn't a database, so we had to figure out a way how to take all these PDFs and do that. And my colleagues up in Woodstock do that work. The reason why we are concerned about shellfish being contaminated with Karenia brevis is because the organism produces these brevis. These are neurotoxins, and they actually bind to the voltage-gated sodium channels and neurons, and you can get very sick with these things. You can have GI issues, cardiac, and neurological. The onset is usually from 1 to 5 hours, duration 24 to 40 hours, and this is reported disease in Florida. And this is starting to think about a little bit of how we recognize these illnesses by looking at onset symptoms and duration. So if you eat poison and get sick within 5 minutes, it's not NSP, it must be something else. So, talk a little bit about epidemiology. Florida Department of Health maintains an electronic data repository, which is called Merlin. NSP is a reportable disease in Florida. That means that if you're a healthcare provider in the state and you properly diagnose NSP, you're required by law to report it to the Florida Department of Health. And I'll talk a little bit about how well that works. So we queried Merlin for NSP cases from 1997 to 2009. We found 21 cases of these. So that's actually not a heck of a lot when you think about the number of shellfish that are harvested commercially and the other areas that Department of Agriculture actually monitors and maintains. So when you look at these, and this is again starting to do a little bit of epidemiology, we're doing case descriptions. 20 of the cases consume plants. So right there you realize, hey, they're not eating, it's not the oysters that they get sick from. The oysters are generally the resource that's managed by foreign agriculture. They're getting sick from consuming plants. One person didn't know, most of these were females. And again, these are self-identified race, 10 Caucasian, 9 Asian, Pacific Islanders, 2 other. Right there is kind of interesting because if you see the general population in Florida, it's pretty much, it doesn't meet those ratios. I mean, there is a higher propensity of Asians to be collecting these clams than other ethnicities. So that's something that's interesting in public health and maybe an opportunity for outreach to a very specific population. And most of harvested areas 6 to 12, which is quite obvious. And all of these cases really were related to recreational harvesting, which is a very important thing because the commercial harvesters seem to know what's going on, seems to be an issue with the recreational harvesting. So what we do in epidemiology, we like to always calculate rates. We look at what would be an expected rate versus what we see. NSP, you can do it, and we did that, and that's a really low number, but it really doesn't mean anything because if you look at, not everyone in Florida is eating oysters, not everyone is eating clams. So this is something we calculate, but it's in a way a little bit of a meaningless number. When we look at what is really going on, we tend to think that we're not really seeing the whole picture. The affected people may not have sought medical care. So let's say you're out there harvesting, you eat some of these clams, you eat, let's say, oysters in a different situation. You can be getting sick, and probably almost everyone in the room has eaten somewhere, gotten a little sick, and not necessarily running to the doctor. So you do not know about that. The NSP, when we're talking shellfish poisoning, may have been misdiagnosed by healthcare providers, so they have to make the proper diagnosis. And if you tell them you ate shellfish, they could say that you've got a different disease. Maybe they say that you was a bacteriological thing, you just got sick because of food poisoning. And, they tend to treat some of these things very similarly. That's why it's important that they have a really good history of physical, because there's some fairly unique characteristics of NSP, like tingling in your mouth and your extremities that wouldn't necessarily be with other illnesses. Sometimes they misdiagnose it and say, let's say they think you have sick-terror fish poisoning, but it's really NSP or something like that. And so that's something else what we have to look for. NSP cases may not be reported with DOAs, despite being a reportable disease. So you may get sick enough to go to the doctor, you may even diagnose it properly, and it just sits there. I mean, you guys know, when you go to the doctor's office, they're required to do so much now in terms of reporting. They might not necessarily do this, or may not necessarily even realize that NSP is a reportable disease. We have over 100 illnesses that are required to be reported. So if they're not on top of that, they may miss it. And that's not necessarily the reason NSP. There's a lot of other cases. And underreported is a real issue in the Florida Department of Health for a number of illnesses, even ones that are much higher incidence than NSP. One of the things that we do get information from is from the Florida Poison Information Network. There's 3 poison networks around Florida. One in Miami, one in Tampa, and then the database and reporting center in Jacksonville. And the Department of Health has a really good relationship with them, with great thing about these poison control centers, you can call them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, holidays, no matter what. So if you get ill, you call them, we have trained them to understand how to regulate illness a little bit better. But what the great thing is, over the last couple of years, we've been able to actually go into your database in essence almost real time and look for illnesses. So that's one of the things I do. I go in there and I query that and I try to find those things out. And also, if they have anything related to an NSP or let's say single terrorism, we have issues in Florida, also Shellfish poisoning. We get those and then they'll call us and then we'll do follow-up through the county health departments and make sure that we get that information. So when we look at the information that came into our Merlin reporting system, it was only general information where shellfish were collected. Again, you have to realize that people collect this information, epidemiologists, and in a way, monitoring for environmental illnesses is not something they do a lot of. They spend a lot of other things. So they don't necessarily say, well, we harvested in Pine Island Sound, okay, where? And so we're trying to train to get much more specific information so we can find out really what's going on. Because let's say if they're harvesting within an area that is open, which we were actually looking at, that would be an issue that we have to work with our experts to make sure that, what can we do to make sure that the word is getting out. Interesting enough, as you can see in the last bullet, some of the NSP cases, people who got NSP knew of the red tide in the area and harvested anyway. And there are people out there that said, I've been eating these things for years, and they've got sick, it's no problem. But also, you have to realize that a lot of the people that are doing this harvesting are tourists. They may be tourists from Florida, so they're coming in from Miami or maybe Tallahassee, where I'm from, for the holidays, and they come down and they harvest. They may not realize that these things are even regulated. When I first moved to Florida and I kayaking, I saw all these areas of that have oysters, and I was like, oh, these look good, And to harvest them, I had no clue that they were even regulated as openings and closings. A lot of people don't even know you need a fishing license to harvest shellfish. So again, there's an issue in terms of who gets that information, who's knowledgeable, and who's going to behave themselves when there's contaminated areas. So really the bottom line of this is that NSP is prevented largely by the closure of shellfish harvesting areas during very high foods. The Department of Agriculture has done a marvelous job of that. I don't think it's 100%. I think there's probably people potentially getting sick from closed areas that we just don't know about. Again, it's very successful for the commercial harvesters. This is an issue, an economic issue, because when there's a big red tide in this area, people stop eating Florida seafood. So even though the shellfish, you can eat oysters you can harvest commercially, people don't know that or they don't believe it. So a lot of seafood restaurants have real issues during the red tide that their customer volume goes way down. So we need to really ramp up some of the outreach that we're doing. There's no documented cases of NSP for commercial harvested shellfish. I'm just saying. But we need to do a better job of protecting our recreational harvesting in closed areas. And that's much harder because if you're on vacation, how do we reach you? If you go to the Department of Agriculture website, will you be able to look at that information and understand? Because again, they're opening and closing depending on rainfall, bacteriological sampling, red tides, time of year, so it's not an easy thing to understand if that area where you're interested in open and close. And we continue to work with them on trying to do those outreach investigations. I would want to thank the Department of Agriculture and Institute Services for a lot of the data that they provide. Florida Fish and Wildlife does a lot of work related to trying to do various scout counts. Work with the Florelling a lot in that kind of work. Some of this work that we did was funded by a National Science Foundation award that we got through Wichita Oceanographic Institute. And we also have some Laura Fleming, and I'm going to use her. She's a pillar of environmental public health in Florida. She was with the University of Miami for about 20 years, and now she's over in England, and some of that work is also done by her. I also want to acknowledge a co-author, Jeremy Barris. He came to us as an intern, and I can tell you, it's probably something you know, when you get interns, it's a crapshoot. A lot of these kids just want to get in, get out. Some want to stick their little toe in the leaf. Jeremy was amazing. He did so much work. He was a great grad student, and he renewed my faith in interns, and so now I'll maybe take another 5 or 10 and see what happens. Also, Porter Hoagland's an interesting character. He's a medical marine economist, and he's trying to assess some of these economic impacts from these blooms. Andrew Reed also works with him. And my dear friend and colleague, Becky Lazinski, who is now getting a PhD in epidemiology from the University of Florida, and how I work with them. And if you'd like to contact me, I can be reached at that email address and phone number. I also want to acknowledge some of my other colleagues, Carolyn Collins, who's an epidemiologist, and again, Becky Lazinski. And I just wanted to have some nice pictures to show there's real people behind those names. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to such a diverse crowd. Thank you very much for all the work you do to protect Florida's environment and make it a better place.
Got time for a couple questions?
It's working. I just wanted to make a note. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. I'm actually on the regulatory side, and if there's any questions as far as how to know when an area is open or closed, write this website down, www.freshfromflorida.com. We have an awesome website that Tallahassee has inputted, and just look under the division offices. It says aquaculture, and then when you click on aquaculture, you'll see that map that he mentioned earlier, and it will have all of those shellfish harvesting areas. And so I strongly support, the public health aspect as well. Even though I regulate, but I also support the public health aspect. And if you have any questions, you can call our office. We're in the Port Charlotte area now. Another thing too is the red tide contingency plan is something that is more on the commercial side. And so we've done a really great job in trying to get, first of all, it's still a pilot program, but my understanding is the Interstate Shellfish Sanitation Conference actually, pushed forward to go ahead and try to see if we can get it implemented. So that's a positive note as well. On the recreational side, I think the best part is just education. And I think a lot of us have also mentioned with other experiences, educating the public. So hats off to Andy and great presentations.
Good morning. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I'm from Sarasota County. I used to do this many years ago. What I wanted to ask you is, from the 20 cases that you had, were they confirmed on Mercenaria, or was there any particular allusion to the species, the specific species that was the causative agent for NSP? The reason for me asking is that there was a study done in 1997 where we found out that not only Mercenaria got accumulation of biotoxins. It's very hard for the individuals that come and pick up shellfish to know which species they're dealing with, to the point that, for example, at the time there was Chionica cancellata, that it's very hard to distinguish between Mercenaria and Mercenaria. And it ended up poisoning, I think, a couple of newborns. My question is, do you guys receive on your reports exactly what species was consumed to cause NSP?
We're a public health agency. When you started throwing out those scientific names, I started to sweat.
I apologize.
I know. I'll answer your question. I'm facetious. Most of those cases were due to harvesting of fragile surf clams. So that's a different species, not a commercially viable thing. But it's interesting. We've worked with Fish and Wildlife over the years, and there's a number of non-commercially valuable species of organisms that can accumulate brevetoxins to very high amounts. So we've had NSP cases that were documented from people eating like conchs or other things, or from coquinas, people, harvesting thousands of coquinas. They read in one of these magazines about people harvesting this, eating, and they make a broth and they eat it. So those are a little bit rare. We don't think that we're seeing a lot of those, but in terms of NSP cases from commercially harvested oysters, it's rare. We've had issues with NSP accumulating in scallops, but because you don't eat the whole thing, the concentration of brevetoxins in the muscle of the scallops is relatively low, and it's fine. We are also a little bit concerned about the accumulation of brevetoxins in fish, but Jerome Noir and a bunch of other folks who have done some work in the past when we had that NIH study did find that that brevetoxins can accumulate in fish, but that's mostly an issue when other organisms like dolphins eat the whole fish, not necessarily in the fillet. The fillet seem to be relatively unaffected during red tide blooms.
We're going to finish this up at break time, okay?
All right, thank you,